So let's have a look. Right, we are ready and raring to go for game week. Game week 2. Already made a bit of a mess up there, Benny boy. So it is the second week of the Premier League, and we're so excited for it. But there's already been some huge Premier League injury news. So we're going to start off, as always, we go through this alphabetically. First of which being is Arsenal. So looking at the Arsenal injury page on the Premier Injuries website, and as always, people, this is the best place to go to for injuries. I think the huge one is Kai Havertz. And as we know, it's kind of prompted this huge move for Arsenal to get Eze. I'm obviously really excited about that. But looking at it, Ben, what are the specifics of this injury?
Yeah, well, the specifics and the short answer would be we don't really know. Mikel Arteta, very coy on the situation, wasn't prepared to give too much away, both in terms of the type of injury, how it occurred, and ultimately the extent of that. Assessments and evaluations continue, but like you say, the arrival of Eberechi Eze suggests that it doesn't look great. Now, once they know or they have an understanding or better understanding the full extent of that injury, then they will know on the next steps. But yeah, certainly at this stage, it doesn't look great. Obviously, coming off the back of that long-term hamstring injury in the summer. And yeah, this is another setback. So very disappointing for both Arteta and, of course, the player himself.
And so with the wording around it, the fact that it's been classed as a knee injury, is that correct, Ben? Does that mean that it's a recurrence of his last injury? Is this a totally new one?
Yeah, this is something completely different. Of course, he had surgery on his hamstring. Both occurred in training. The one warm weather training camp earlier this year in Dubai, that was fairly innocuous. And again, it's very disappointing that he suffered this setback. Well, we think it's in training. There was a possibility that it could have been during that United game, and he's seen that through. But again, like I say, we're not 100% sure with regards to that. But like I say, potentially, if it was from the United game, then maybe just that mechanism of injury suggests that we could be looking at an MCL. And depending on the severity of that, we could be talking from potentially weeks to months. There may be some cartilage damage, something in and around that meniscus. Again, the severity of that would determine the timeline. The better scenario of this would just be if it was just a heavy knock, and we could just be looking at maybe a matter of weeks with regards to that. But like I say, Mikel Arteta very coy on that situation and wasn't prepared to give much away.
So looking at the starting 11 for the weekend, then shouldn't be too many changes, but a lot of people be going, is Eze going to be able to play? Is he going to start? But I think it's well past the deadline now for him to be able to play at the weekend. Isn't that right, Ben?
Yeah, I think we have a lunchtime cut off for the Premier League rules, and Eze still isn't over the line yet, so he's not with the group. Elsewhere within the camp, there's going to be Ben White, who's facing a late fitness test. And also there's big question marks over the availability of Jurrien Timber. Now that's an ongoing issue, more about managing his load currently. So they've eased him back in training. And again, that's an indication that he's probably not going to start, and any impact will be from the bench going forward.
And so kind of continuing through the rest of the team, though, Arsenal came out that game against Man United pretty unscathed. The only thing was that Declan Rice came off a little bit early. Is that because of an injury issue, or is it kind of fitness issue? I mean, is there any news about that, or has that just kind of been, glazed over, hidden under the carpet? Because usually he plays the full 90, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly been involved in training. So even if it was just a minor little knock or niggle, it appears to be more of a precautionary measure. Like I say, he's been with the group. The two obvious absentees were the likes of Timber and White this week. Of the ones that we didn't know about, Christian Norgard, again, he's going to be absent to summer signing. We're probably looking at maybe another 7 to 10 days for him.
So let's turn our attention then to Aston Villa. And obviously in the opening weekend, your boys held them to a 0-0 draw. I thought they were good for the win, actually, to be fair, Newcastle. For all the issues that happened over the summer, Newcastle were just looking brilliant once again. But we're going to get onto their team news in a little bit. Let's first of all look at the Villains, though. They're playing Brentford, and they should be up for this one. They should be confident against, a B side that were absolutely demolished in game week 1. But is there any injury news or any injury returns that should help or hinder the
Yeah,
Villas?
not so much injuries news, but availability. One out and one in, as it were. We've seen Ezri Konza. He was dismissed for denying a goal scoring opportunity for that pullback on Anthony Gordon when he was going clear through. So he will serve a one-match ban. On the flip side, Emi Martinez, he was dismissed at the back end of last season at Old Trafford. He returns to the Villa squad.
And so we've got a question here from GV. He says, is Saka a good captaincy for game week 2? So obviously they're referring to fantasy sort of games. So Saka obviously playing Leeds. What do you think on that one, Ben?
I don't think Saka looked great in game week 1, if the truth be told. I think players will take a little bit of a while to get up to speed. Leeds are obviously buoyed by their first win of the season. Hard fought out ground out win out against Everton. They have lost their captain, which we will touch upon. So, Arsenal will fancy 3 points, but I wouldn't necessarily be looking towards Saka as my captain this week personally.
Yes, I did think he was a little bit kind of out of the side in terms of he's just not recaptured that form that he was on fire the last few seasons. Looking at the data in this game, Arsenal have a 60% chance of victory, and the side, in recent form, Arsenal have been really, really good in the head-to-head against Leeds. I'm just kind of looking at the history here, so they're unbeaten in 5 against Leeds. So it's very unlikely that a promoted Leeds team is going to cause them a fuss again. I think as well, the kind of openness of the game is, a huge kind of indication for whether a team is going to play well or not. So I don't know. I don't know if Saka's a good choice. Would you be more on with Gyökeres? Because I think Arsenal are going to score. I think they'll probably score a few goals in this game. But who do you back in this? Or is it just one of those games where it's probably set piece goal, one of the players that you just don't think are going to score, and it's probably one to avoid?
I am a Gyökeres owner, so of course he's a player that I'd love to see on the score sheet. The longer these things go on, that the more the pressure builds and the more the chatter around his price tag comes in, to the conversation. So it would be good to see him. But like I say, it was very workmanlike from Arsenal. It was a great result. Don't get me wrong. There's been a lot of hype with regards to Manchester United over the summer and their recruitment at Old Trafford on the opening weekend. So to come away with 3 points was fantastic, but I don't think Arsenal were great, and I'd probably be inclined to look elsewhere.
We got a lovely message here from FPL Victoria's Secret. I wonder if they're a good-looking model. They said the dream team is back together. How is everyone? Well, after a message from a Victoria's Secret model, you couldn't be doing any better, really, could you, Ben?
Living the dream, as it were, Jay. Appreciate it.
GV, he thinks the physicality and speed of Goodmanson Saka has to deal with is a good point there. Victoria's Secret says Saka is a safe pick, but Gyökeres can go big. So back to the team news, and we're going to go on to Bournemouth against Wolves. And I thought they were very, very impressive against Liverpool in that first game. But, the result didn't go their way. Unfortunately, it was a 4-2. I thought 2-2 would have been a fair result for them. But obviously, Antoine Semenyo was the man of the match. Going into this game week, though, is there any boosts for the team? Because they've got a very good fixture at home against Wolves. They should do well there.
Yeah, Ryan Christie, he's been sidelined for quite a while due to the groin-related problem, has been back with the group this week. So he's took part in that. Provided he comes through the final session, it looks like he will be included in the matchday squad. And also Justin Kluivert, taking a little bit longer to recover from that calf complaint, partially training with the team. So that's a suggestion, certainly, that he's going to be nowhere near that starting 11. And I suspect probably not the matchday squad. The game may come too soon. You touched upon Semenyo. I thought Bournemouth were fantastic last week, and in particular him. He's responded really well in the face of the abuse that he received from a certain individual down at Anfield. So he's been very positive and upbeat, and what a way to respond to those horrific actions down in Liverpool.
And just for people, I'm getting a lot of the data here from the Numbers Game website. It's actually free, the Premier League data, so you can head over there, make an account, and then you've got access to it. It's really good. The AI, I think, is one of the best in terms of predicting matches. So just head over there. It's really easy to do. And there's some good deals on there as well. But let's turn it back to Brentford. So they are the team opposing Aston Villa. And they were absolutely ripped apart, weren't they, Ben? I was shocked at the kind of decline in their quality. But I guess, it shouldn't be too shocking with the number of big players that they've lost, plus the manager. What do you think on their situation there? And obviously the injury news as well.
Yeah, we touched upon it last week. We said, the likelihood is it's going to be a very tough and long season for Keith Andrews and the Brentford team down there. The big departure of Bryan Mbeumo, the issues off the field with Yohan Wissa. So, things are going to be tough, and I don't see that getting any better anytime soon. Of course, all of those problems were exacerbated by the loss of Mikael Damsgaard last weekend as well. He was omitted from the matchday squad following the birth of his child. Now, the good news for B supporters is that Damsgaard will be back and available. There are sort of 2 or 3 other players who could potentially come back into the squad, but none of those are likes of Ethan Pinnock, Paris Goma, Younes Konak. They're probably not pushing for a start in that 11 and more sort of players who will bolster that B's bench. So again, it looks like it's going to be another tough week for Brentford.
Really good question here from GV, though. He said, why should Brentford's defence suffer like it has done thus far? Collins and Van der Berg are so good. I guess they haven't lost any defensive players. So what do you think is the issue there, Ben? Is it the tactics of the new manager, or is it the loss of Thomas Frank that psychologically is affecting the team?
I don't think you can pin it down to just one single thing. There will be many influencing factors. I mean, don't forget Bryan Mbeumo, as much as he was a great attacking force, he was one very hard-working player. He was up and down that pitch as well. So, and the likes of Christian Norgard. So, when you're talking about a defensive unit, you're talking about conceding goals, you're not just talking about a back 4 or a back 3 or 5, as he did under Thomas Frank. It's defending as a collective unit. So, you've got players who are coming into a team and maybe asked to play a slightly different role and under slightly different tactics and methodologies, and Keith Andrews. And also you've got different personnel, maybe personnel who aren't up to the level as some of those other players have been. So, like I say, it does take a little bit of time, and you can do all the preparation away from the pitch over the summer. But once you cross that white line and the Premier League season kicks off, there's nothing quite like, that experience. So, hopefully things will improve for Brentford, but it needs to be done quickly.
So Brighton are the team up next. And obviously last weekend, there was a bit of a shock. Danny Welbeck was not in the team. So first of all, Ben, what is the injury news on him?
Danny Welbeck was fit and available. It was just a managerial choice from Fabian Hertha. He went with Georgino Rutter, I believe, if I've got that right. I'm sure somebody pointed out if I not. And it seems as if Rutter will get the nod again. Reading between the line with Hertzler, he's been very complimentary of Rutter and his recovery from that long-term injury. Talked about his influence on the training pitches, his happy, outgoing personality. And I suspect that Danny Welbeck will be used probably more as an impact player from the bench throughout the season.
Yeah, so through the season then, is Rutter the one that people should be kind of backing now in these sorts of games to be involved with the goals? Or, you mentioned last week Karu Mitoma. Do you think that he's going to have a good season?
Yeah, I would like to see Mitoma, bounce back to the player that we've seen 23-24. Of course, he was hampered somewhat last campaign. So, yeah, look, I think there's a slightly different dynamic to this Brighton team this season. They've lost the likes of Adam Webster. He's out probably for the rest of the year. Solly Marsh isn't too far away. Maybe after the international break, we could see him pushing. And he's another player who's been, suffered terrible injury problems over the last sort of 18 months. So to get him back to anywhere near his pre-injury levels would be a fantastic addition to that Brighton squad.
Right, so let's turn our attention to Burnley. And before we actually start on the injury news, we have a great question once again. Would you play Dubravka this week or stick to Sanchez? And this is an interesting point because the Chelsea game and obviously the Burnley game seem to point to, victories or easy matches for them. So tonight, that's why we're going live quite early today, is obviously the Chelsea game against West Ham, and both of those teams though look like they could not score in game week 1. And then you've got Dubravka obviously in goal for Burnley as they take on Sunderland. Now last season Sunderland and Burnley games, they ended, I think it was 0-0 and 1-0, so 2 clean sheets there for the Clarets. And obviously the other big thing is the huge gap in quality between Burnley and Sunderland. There was 24 or 26 points difference between them. So it just shows you
24, I think. Yeah.
So kind of looking at that, where would you trust, Ben, that West Ham won't score or that Burnley can keep a clean sheet in the Premier League?
I mean, the 2 things to point out: Sunderland did actually miss 2 penalties in time added on last season. I think James Trafford saved both of those to keep that clean sheet intact. So that was one thing to note. And the second, I think the team from last season and this season are really incomparable, both for Sunderland and Burnley. There's been so many changes in personnel. One of those being the likes of James Trafford moving on. So it's difficult. Now, I don't want to get caught too much up into game week 1. Obviously, Burnley, very disappointed to come away from Tottenham 3-0, but that wasn't to be expected. Whereas Sunderland will be riding a little bit of a high. But for me, whether it's, Scott Parker hasn't come out and he said, and he sort of dealt with it with a fairly straight bat. For me, this is I wouldn't even say it's a not loser. I almost see this as a must-win game for Burnley. You need to be beating those teams in and around, those teams that you would expect to be in and around those relegation places come the end of the season on your home turf. And Turf Moor will be bouncing. So, I'm dismissing those game week 1 results, and I expect a fairly close contest. And I think Burnley could maybe come away with, a narrow win, possibly 1-0. So, that would maybe have me leaning towards Dubravka. But, West Ham, need to improve Girardi. The scoreline probably flattered Sunderland a little bit. They weren't as bad as that scoreline suggests. And Graham Potter will be doing a lot of work on the training pitches. So I don't think Chelsea will have it as easy. I mean, it's a tough call. The percentage player, of course, is to go Sanchez.
Yeah. I think, looking at it as well, the numbers game predicted data says it's about 50% chance of a win for Burnley against Sunderland. And with Chelsea, let me just quickly look here on the website. So that is that's tonight's game, 55% chance. And so kind of looking at the clean sheet data as well. So West Ham, Chelsea have a 34% chance of a clean sheet. Whereas Burnley have, drum roll please, a 40% chance. So kind of just going from the numbers game data again, this is all free data on our website. The data points to actually maybe Burnley being the better option. And I think that could again be a differential for a lot of people. Or if people are kind of betting on the Premier League as well, that could be the way to go about it, because I think a lot of people will be looking at that Burnley game and thinking, oh, they lost last week 3-0. Sunderland won 3-3 last week. So, it could be one of those ones that not a lot of people are thinking about. But let's go to the Chelsea team. What is the latest for the Blues?
Yeah, Tyson was a late withdrawal from the squad last weekend. There were early concerns that it could be a long-term problem, but it was more of a precautionary issue. Had those scans, absolutely fine. Rejoined the group mid part of this week, so he will be in and around that team. And for those who are maybe considering some options in that Chelsea backline, Enzo Maresca has said that Tyson is probably the only like-for-like replacement for Levi Colwill. We know that he's out certainly for the foreseeable due to that ACL injury. Nicholas Jackson is available again after suspension, but Maresca said that he will not be involved in the matchday squad. Of course, he's been heavily linked with a move away, potentially as Newcastle as one of those suitors.
And I think one of the things that I was very disappointed about in that first Chelsea game was just the lack of creativity. You know, Cole Palmer looked anonymous in that match. Usually he is a brilliant, world-class player, but in that game there was just no difference made from any of the players, really. And, you know, with the amount that they spent on exciting new signings, it was really, really poor from them. Crystal Palace up next.
Well, I mean, what I would say to add to that, you know, you're coming off the back of the Club World Cup where, you know, Chelsea went deep in that. So they've had a heavily disrupted pre-season. They're weeks behind some of their counterparts. So you've got this balancing act of players where, you know, it's going to take a little bit of time for those to get up to speed. And it's fine coming in and winning these pre-season friendlies and behind closed doors games and looking quite pretty on the eye. But like I say, that competitive side of the Premier League is completely different. So it was no real surprise to me to see Chelsea, you know, struggle a little bit in that opening game week.
So kind of going ahead through the season, though, do you think that that's going to stifle performance a little bit? Because as we know from the literature, every kind of lost week of pre-season training means a much higher likelihood of injuries throughout the season. Is that going to be something that's going to haunt Chelsea now? You know, getting that far in the tournament, playing, you know, they did win it, but at what cost for the next season, which is arguably more important, kind of establishing themselves in the Premier League?
Yeah, potentially it's going to have an issue. We don't really know. We've never had a Club World Cup before, so we'll be watching with bated breath. What Chelsea do have is a lot of strength and depth within that squad. So Maresca is able to rotate and rest players and cut his cloth accordingly. I think during the early game weeks, what we're going to see is maybe inconsistency with regards to performance levels. And yes, you're absolutely right. There's potential, you know, down the line that, you know, players may be picking up a lot of soft tissue issues because, you know, they just haven't had that opportunity to rest and fully recover. You know, players now will be going from Club World Cup to the Premier League into the World Cup. And, you know, you're going to have this period of time where players, you know, may not have had a rest for potentially 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. And it was kind of exactly like that after the postponed Euros, and we saw such a huge amount of increase in those soft tissue injuries and hamstrings and all sorts, and people were scratching their head saying, why is there so many injuries? Well, it's quite obvious why. We've got a couple of talking points here. First of all, Reece James, will he bring back some of his old sparkle? I think, you know, just from a player perspective, it's been great to see that he's been able to sustain a level of availability now. I hope he can do it throughout the season. But do you think that he's got to alter his play style, Ben, just to kind of protect himself?
Not so much his style, but certainly Maresca has talked about managing the player. You know, he went from the expectation of playing 2 to 3 games a week to a level where, you know, you will start maybe one and you may not play 90 minutes. That's a reality of the situation at the moment, given his injury history. I think we looked at the data over the last maybe 4.5 seasons, and he was a 1 and 2 player. He would play 1 in every 2 Premier League matches, and that probably dipped a little bit below that last season. So now, again, we're just seeing a little bit of consistency in terms of his availability, and hopefully that will reflect in his performances. But in terms of what he's asked and required to do, I wouldn't expect Maresca to change too much, other than the fact that, you know, he might have him in and out, and he certainly isn't one of those locked-in starters, you know, for every given game week.
Going back to Arsenal very quickly, we've been asked here, what do you think Eze's position is in the team? Do you think he'll start on the left for most games ahead of Martinelli? How do you see him in the best 11 of Arsenal going forward this season?
Big question. I mean, you're probably more well placed given your allegiances to Arsenal than me, but personally, I probably do see him on that left-hand side. But there's a lot of fluidity in that Arsenal attack as well. And again, we're talking about maybe rest and rotation, managing squad around different competitions, of which Arsenal are going to want to go deep in a lot of those. There's going to be a lot of pressure on Arteta to win something. So, I don't think it's going to be a case of necessarily, bringing in all of the youngsters for the, the Carabao Cup or League Cup. These days, I think you will want to go strong. They will, investors will want to see returns for their money that they've, spent in the transfer window. So, but if everybody's fit and available, for me, as a starter on that left hand side.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. He brings that quality that I think Martinelli just lacks a little bit. Martinelli's quite direct, whereas Eze loves to dribble. He can cut inside, but he can go direct as well. And obviously his finishing is second to none, whereas Martinelli does leave a lot to be desired. He's a huge upgrade there. But what I also like as well, and what you've mentioned there, is he offers that kind of ability to rotate. So, last season we saw Ødegaard get jaded quite, late on into the season. We also saw his injury. Lack of creativity was a huge issue for the team, kind of resting on Saka and Ødegaard. Well, now you've got one of the best creative midfielders in the Premier League joining as well. You've got some other players in there who can kind of create around them. It's going to be better for the balance of that Arsenal squad. But let's move on to Crystal Palace, who are obviously the team losing Eze. How's that going to affect the team, Ben? Who's going to come in and play his position?
Yeah, we've seen a couple of 3 changes in the Conference League on Thursday night. Again, it's a huge blow, and all of the talk as well is not only the loss of Eze, but will Mark being a Crystal Palace player by the time this window closes. There are opportunities all over the place in terms of who's going to potentially come in with that. Last night we've seen the likes of Sasa Lerma and Deveni as an option for Oliver Glasner. Didn't talk too much with regards to his setup. He cut a very frustrated figure, both in the post-match press conference on Thursday and the pre-match conference today on Friday. It's as a leaving to Arsenal or Tottenham or wherever, it doesn't come as any big surprise. But the fact that Palace haven't preempted that move by bringing in another player is a big disappointing thing. And I think what they'll be looking to do is, it's just a temporary band-aid for this maybe next game before they can try to get a big name through the door to appease some of the frustrations down at Selhurst Park.
Yeah. Also, they do have some other players coming into the scene that they can look forward to. Decore, he'll be back fairly soon. Is that correct, Ben? Like December-ish time?
Yeah, you talked about a long-term injury, and we've already had one setback. So, listen, there are no guarantees with that. Okay. And initially, it had hoped that he would be coming, a lot sooner, but it's had a reaction there on the training pitches, so that hasn't worked out quite so well. So, I wouldn't be relying on players like Decore, certainly at this moment in time, just because given the gravity of the injury setback that he's had.
Okay. Everton are the next team, and they're obviously playing in their new stadium. What kind of effect do you think that will have on the players? Will it give them a boost being in front of their home crowd, or will the lack of familiarity actually maybe have no kind of home game effect whatsoever on them, and actually they lose maybe that advantage that they had in other seasons?
I mean, you would imagine that the atmosphere on the game is going to be electric. And after a disappointing performance and display and result at Ellen Road on Monday night, this could be the perfect sort of antidote to that, and hopefully get 3 points on the board. David Moyes was very frustrated. I thought, yes, while it was a dubious penalty decision, in my opinion, on the balance of play, Leeds probably done enough to take 3 points. I'm a big fan of Jack Grealish. I think he's going to become a big player for Everton. We just need to get him up to a level where he's able to contribute, build that match fitness up. He's had another week on the training pitches. So again, he's a man that likes to be the center of attention. He's a game winner. He's a game changer, and he has that little bit of quality to unlock defenses. So, like I say, he'll be another week forward in terms of where he needs to be. It's just whether David Moyes believes that he's ready to start.
I think as well, this has been brought up as well in the comments that Brighton's non-stop pressing will be hard for Everton to deal with because they already had a hard time against Leeds. They were second best, as you said, throughout that game. I thought they should have brought on Grealish a little bit sooner, and maybe also Tieno Henry as well, just give the new striker an opportunity. But as you kind of said before the game, they're probably looking to manage him as he's new to the Premier League. Up next, Fulham versus Manchester United. Fulham kind of continuing poor form from last season. They just weren't looking at their best, but they did manage to steal an equaliser late on against Brighton. But do they have any injury worries or any positives coming into this game week to boost the side?
Yeah, the two main talking points. Ryan Sessegnon come up with a little bit of a hamstring niggle back end of pre-season. He was kept out of game week 1 as a precaution. He should be fine. He has trained. The other concern or worry is around Anthony Robinson, knee surgery back end of May. Taking a little bit longer than thought, but he should be there or thereabouts. Again, I wouldn't expect Marco Silva to throw him straight into that start 11, but maybe, after the international break, he'll be pushing, for a starting berth at fullback, but he could make the squad before that September break.
Turning our attention to the team that we were waxing lyrical about just a second ago, Leeds United, but I don't think they'll be having a great one this week. Travelling to Arsenal, they have a terrible home record in London fixtures, but is the team news positive at least? Because if I remember the game rightly, didn't a couple of players come off a little bit early with injuries? What was the situation there?
The skipper is a big talking point, Ethan Ampadu. That didn't look great at the time. He tried to sort of continue it and run it off, but it looks as if he suffered a little bit of an MCL, or medial collateral ligament, knee ligament injury there. So that's going to keep him out again until at least September. No definitive timeline on that. It depends on the severity. You could be looking at maybe around 4 to 6 weeks. It doesn't look like he's going to need surgery at this stage, so he's going to be a big loss. Dominic Calvert-Lewin potentially could be in and around that team. That might be, a big boost for Leeds. Again, he hasn't had much of a pre-season, so it's just a case of building up that foundational fitness to get him ready for the rigours of the Premier League.
One quick question before we move on to the next team of Liverpool. Why didn't Smith Rowe start as number 10 last week for Fulham? Is there an injury concern, or is it again a tactical issue?
Yeah, no injury. He's fit and available. So it was purely down to Marco Silva's own thoughts and what he's observing on the training pitches. We've heard him talk about it before, about how he thinks Smith Rowe needs to build himself up to become more robust, to play more minutes, to improve his fitness, to limit those little niggles and setbacks that he has. And this, to be honest, I think this is a really big season for Smith Rowe. But like I say, he is fit and available. It was purely down to tactics and team selection rather than any other fitness issues.
Now, Liverpool have a huge game against Newcastle, travelling up to Tyneside this weekend. I guess, first of all, are you going to go to that game, Ben, or are you busy?
Well, as you know, Liverpool arrive on Tyneside, I'll be travelling in the other direction. I'll actually be watching the game from London, business related. So I'm in and out of London, so won't get an opportunity to see the game firsthand live. But I will be watching from a public house in and around Shoreditch, I suspect.
Oh, well, maybe some of the listeners might join you if they find out your Shoreditch address. Maybe you shouldn't have said that, Ben. But moving on to the team news, and is the Liverpool team news giving you a little bit of positivity? We've got Frimpong out. Gravenberch is back, though. What is the team going to be looking like going into this really huge game at the weekend?
Yeah, the big news was the Frimpong. Looked as if he had tweaked his hamstring last weekend in Bournemouth. Post-match assessments revealed that it's likely to keep him out until after the international break, which is a little bit of a disappointment, but not totally unexpected for new players coming in to the league. That does limit options at right back. Conor Bradley's only had a brief few minutes partially training with the first team. So we're looking at somebody who's going to deputise in that position. Previously, we've seen the likes of Curtis Jones, Soboslai, even Watara are all options on that right-hand side. Joe Gomez could also play in there, but he's coming off the back of an Achilles problem. He isn't training. He isn't undertaking all of the sessions. So again, it's a little bit of a risk given his injury history. So I think it might be somebody like Jones possibly who could, drop in there and deputise with maybe Gomez coming off the bench in the second half.
There's a lot of love for Newcastle in the comments as well. Newcastle will win. Who will score? As it's Ben's team. Gordon and Tonali in a 2-1 win. All these comments here. Do you agree, Ben? Is it going to be a 2-1 win?
Do you know what it is? I have a sneaky inkling, and this isn't me black and white, tinted glasses, because I will, if I believe that we're going to lose or what have you, then I will come out and say it. But I've got a feeling that I've got 3-1 in my head for a start. I just think the atmosphere, Newcastle fans are going to be pumped. I mean, it's always a big game anyway against Liverpool. I think the Alexander Isak situation, as it currently stands, has added a different dimension and a bit of an edge to the game. I think, you could see the likes of Joe Linton and Bruno Guimaraes. Do not be surprised if there are cards flying about with the likes of Alexi McAllister. We know that South American clash anyway, Argentina and Brazil is always bubbling underneath the surface, so it ain't going to take a lot to ignite the touch paper with that. Anthony Gordon, that's his hometown club, Liverpool. He's going to be getting a lot of stick off the Liverpool supporters for his Everton roots. I fancy him to get on the score sheet, and I really do fancy 3 points.
We've got a bit for criticism of you here, Ben. They said, take 2-1, don't get too greedy.
You've got to shoot for the stars.
Yes. What's the saying? Aim for the sky.
Shoot for the moon, and if you miss, it's still amongst those stars.
There you go. One of your lovely Benisms, as I like to call them. Manchester City up next. And I think the team should be as strong as last week, shouldn't they?
Yeah, main talking point is who's going to start in goal. James Trafford was a surprise, started down at Wolves and had a really solid game. Edison ruled out due to illness. Heavily linked with a move potentially to Galatasaray. He has trained this week. Pep quite guarded. He says, we'll decide on who's going to start in goal after dinner tomorrow. Personally, I would stick with James Trafford. Elsewhere within the squad, the only additions we're looking at are Phil, Foden and Rodri. All of the others who were sidelined through injury will remain in the treatment room.
We've got a question here on Rodri. When is he likely to start again?
I think if Manchester City keep on performing like they did, very efficient, ruthless as they were down at Molineux, I think that gives Pep the luxury to be able to build Rodri's minutes gradually. I always said there was a feeling that it would be after the international break before Rodri was really sort of pushing to get those starts in the team. Like I say, if they're getting 3 points and they're performing well, then there's no need to take any risks or chances.
So on to Manchester United, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, they're playing Fulham. Any changes thereafter? What was a really positive performance against Arsenal?
Yeah, Martinez and Mazraoui, those are the only two players sidelined through injury. There was a lot of talk about Andre Onana last weekend coming off the back of the hamstring injury. Ruben Amorim confirmed that the goalkeeper was fit and available, but he decided that he wanted to go with Bayindor, and I think was it Tom Heaton on the bench. The fact is Onana hadn't played any preseason, so that was definitely a consideration. I would expect him to return to the matchday squad, and given the fact that Bayenda didn't cover himself in any glory with that goal that Calafiori scored at the back post, then Onana could be back in that starting 11.
Okay, so that's one that might start from this predicted 11. The other is, will Benjamin Šeško get a start yet, or is he still going to be managed slowly? Because kind of talking earlier to yourself last week, we said that he'll be managed because he's come from a different league. He's entering Manchester United. They'll give him a time to bed in. Is it game week 2 that happens, or is it beyond then?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was quite, there was some positives to take from the United performance. The result, yeah, was very disappointing, but on the whole, they performed quite well. I don't see Ruben Amorim changing things too much. So again, it could mean minutes from the bench, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like I say, it's that period of adaptation. So you're getting the 20 to 30 minutes, and of course, supporters are wanting to go to see their big money signs come in and really hit the ground running. But this way you're just easing that little bit of pressure. The players, getting acclimated, and there's no rush. So, like I say, I don't expect too many changes from Amron given their performance against Arsenal.
Up next, Newcastle. Any big changes to the team?
Well, we're not having Alexander Isak isn't with the group. I have to commend Eddie Howe, the way he's conducted his press conferences. He's been very respectful. I thought he spoke really well with regards to the situation in the face of some tricky questions and just general questioning around what's happening next. But certainly it looks as if there's no imminent resolution to that. Maybe once a transfer deadline does pass, whether he's here or not, then we'll know exactly where we are. But in terms of the rest of the squad, Joe Willett picked up a calf issue out on our preseason tour of Asia. He looks to have healed quicker than initially anticipated. He has been on the training pitches, so possibly there's a place on the bench for him.
Nottingham Forest up next. They are playing Crystal Palace. I think this is going to be a very tight game indeed. But team news-wise, they should be buoyant after that big win in game week 1. But has that affected any of the players, or are they fully fit and ready for game week 2?
Yeah, we're pretty much expecting the Forest squad to be as you were. Nicholas Dominguez is the only problem that we're currently aware of. That's a longer-term knee injury. Nuno, he's been box office this season. We heard some really sort of dramatic comments last week. This week, he's talked about his relationship with the club owner, and again, it's bound to set tongues wagging. He's talked about a breakdown in relations between the two, and I don't know.
Wow.
I just see there's a lot of unrest within the Forest camp at the moment. You just hope that those off-field issues, don't spill over and affect performances, on the pitch.
Yes, well, Nottingham Forest fans will be absolutely livid if it costs Nuno's job, because he is basically a saint up there. He's a god amongst men with the stuff that he has done. But Sunderland are playing Burnley. Again, we've kind of covered our thoughts and feelings. People can wind it back for the kind of data around that. But what is your thoughts, or what's the information on the injuries for the Sunderland team?
Yeah, Jensen Sealth took a heavy knock, awkward landing, looked to be a bit of a hip injury. He's fine. He's trained. Arthur Masuaku is a player who came in the summer. He's been working away. He could be added to the matchday squad. Otherwise, I wouldn't be surprised after a 3-0 win to see the Black Cats unchanged.
Tottenham are up next, and they have that huge game against Manchester City up at the Etihad. But are there going to be any changes to the team? Obviously not Eberechi Eze in there. Just have to remind that as an Arsenal fan. But yes, what is the team going to be looking like? And is there any injury news that people need to be aware of?
Yes and no. The long and the short of it is we're not expecting anybody back. Destiny and Doogie is probably the closest. He has worked on the training pitches, but Thomas Frank, again, feels more comfortable if he gives him another week with the group before reintegrating with the squad. Again, coming off the back of that win over Burnley, I would expect Spurs to pretty much name the same 11. There's been questions with regards to the situation with Richarlison and whether he was actually offered as a make weight in the Eze deal. He sideswiped the question. He talked about Richarlison being his striker, coming off the back of a good performance in the Super Cup, and also his goals in the opening weekend. So he looks nailed down for a start.
And we have a question about Pedro Porro. Should people start him for this week in Fantasy Premier League? Well, the kind of data, again, from the Numbers Game website, 70% chance that Manchester City will win. So that obviously means goals. and very unlikely that they are going to score again by the algorithm, which is free once again. So you can sign up on the website and get the free Premier League AI algorithm. So I would say probably not. I'd be, backing Man City all day. Now the final two, West Ham. What is the latest for the team? And do they have, I guess, confidence issues, going into this week after such a destruction?
Yeah, I mean, the only addition that we could expect to the matchday squad would be George Earthy, but again, he's not a player that you would really be expecting to be pushing for a start. I think he's only had a handful of minutes in that first team in the Premier League. In the small amount of time he has been involved with the squad. So, but it's good to see him back from an ankle ligament problem. I would expect maybe Graham Potter to make a few changes. I touched on it before. The 3-0 scoreline probably flattered Sunderland a little bit. They weren't as bad as the scoreline suggests, but again, it's not a great look. Pressure's mounting on Graham Potter, and the Premier League is relentless. This is a tough game. But I have included Walker Peters in my fantasy team, so it'd be good to see him handed a starting berth under Graham Potter. Like I say, it wouldn't surprise me if there were 2 to 3 changes from that team that did line up on the opening weekend.
One question is, can Callum Wilson give them their first goal? Why isn't he playing at the moment, Ben?
Yeah, I think we're at a stage in Callum Wilson's career now where it not by any stretch is he a nailed-on starter. He's had some well-documented injury problems. He probably, he's going to be more of an impact. He just doesn't have the legs, or there are certainly concerns over his injury record enough to justify him, particularly the start of the season, because he's coming off the back of a few injuries, which held him back at Newcastle. And when it was clear that he wasn't going to be a new contract extension agreed, he was working individually in a way, keeping himself fit. He still wasn't in that competitive team environment. And again, it takes a little bit of a while to get up to speed. And, when you're doing that, what you don't want to do is you don't want to be taking any chances with a player who's had, recurrent hamstring problems.
So the final team is Wolves. And just before we finish up, I just want to remind people, please do hit that subscribe button, hit the like and share as well, so that everybody can get this team news. But yeah, what is the latest with Wolves?
Yeah, we're pretty much as you were. We're expecting a clean bill of health. Vitor Pereira, there was no real questions asked with regards to team news, because all the talking points were around their defeat at home to Manchester City, and how that would affect them. But they look at that as being a game against Manchester City, a team that you would expect, but they're still one of the best teams in Europe, if not the world. So to get turned over 4-0 isn't a disaster. Vitor Pereira will wipe himself down and dust his squad off, and they will go again. And he's got more or less a full complement of players to choose from.
Well, that is the usual team news. We're back every Friday for people, so do hit that subscribe button to the Numbers Game YouTube. And as I've said many times there, a lot of the data that we're talking about as well is on the Numbers Game website. It's free around Premier League stuff, but there's also membership for data on other things. But for now, I'm going to wish everybody the best of luck. We will be back next week, and Ben has got to shoot off to a fun event now.
Yes, I'm off to a wedding, Jason. So I'm late already.
All right,
which is fantastic.
Cheerio, everybody.
So, right, love you and leave you.
There you go.